Ecuadorian people said not in all 4 questions in the referendum proposed by President Daniel Noboa in a direct rejection of his government and proposals. On Monday, the COP30 Climate Summit in Brazil entered its decisive stage after 6 days of negotiations. The Chinese government has urged Japan to stop crossing lines as tensions rise after recent comments of Tokyo's Prime Minister regarding Taiwan. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll begin with the news. Stay with us. On Sunday, Ecuadorians said no to the 4 questions posed by Daniel Noboa's government, which sought support for, among other issues, convening a constituent assembly. According to the National Electoral Commission, with 96% of polling stations counted, the total for the Constitutional Assembly to draft a new constitution was rejected by 61.58% of the votes, representing one of the questions with the highest rejection rate nationwide. On the installation of foreign military bases, which is prohibited by the current constitution draft in 2008, the no vote won 60.58%. Meanwhile, the other 2 proposals eliminated state fundings for political parties and reducing the current numbers of legislators in the National Assembly were rejected by the 58.07% and 53.46%, respectively. This is currently in the same year that Noboa was re-elected president with more than 55% of the votes last April. The no vote that won in the referendum promoted by President Noboa sparked euphoric celebrations in Ecuador's major cities, such as Quito and Guayaquil. Social organizations call on citizens to celebrate the triumphs of no as a victory for democracy and the 2008 Constitution. Opposition leaders were quick to interpret the results as a clear message from the electorate to the president, whom they accuse of attempting an authoritarian shift. These results mark an unavoidable turning point for the Noboa administrations, forcing it to radically rethinking its political and governing strategies. After the results of the Ecuadorian national referendum, the president of the Citizens Revolution Party, Luisa González, granted an exclusive interview to our multimedia platform, where she highlighted the misuse of a budget by the government of President Noboa and how it affects the health and education sector.
There are millions of dollars spent in public relationships, into buying, voting. There's no proper strategy for the conducting of Ecuador. And there's a lot of things to use this money from the public arch, and it's not being used in an efficient way. They're not doing the proper use, but on the top of that, to pay the debt of the dialysis unit, we have more than 1,000 of renal patients in the dialysis clinics, and the next could be also to fix the educational infrastructure. We have more than 4,000 young adults that go out of the educational system, and we know now that the 60% that the criminal bands are formed by young persons. To rescue them is fundamental. We could have get the medicines to save life from the Ecuadorians. Almost the half of the population is from poverty to extreme poverty, going to the public hospitals, and as a result, we don't have even syringes. There are no meds. That's the proper use of the resources. The infrastructure from the streets, we have more and more deaths by traffic accidents because of the infrastructure. The roads and the state highways are reducing. The 60% did fail, and more we have more ideas of investment, but they don't have how to manage the state. They only know about propaganda, and that's why the entire Ecuador is saying no to Ecuador, is saying against it, and is an abrupt fail what this government has now after this whole investment into the campaign.
In this regard, during an exclusive interview with teleSUR, former Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa offered statements on the situation that Daniel Noboa's governments will face after the referendum results.
And the people, the young people, understood this perfectly, and that rejection that can be seen at the polls. In addition to the contradictions, when we were at our best, when we didn't have any military bases, now it turns out that foreign military bases have to come in to do the job. They are useless. Furthermore, people also perceived very well the dangers, that it was a dirty trick, that what they are least interested in is controlling drug trafficking, military crime, and not having a base, a strategic location like Ecuador, in the event of a global conflict with China, Russia, etc.
The former president warned that Ecuador has lost its state of law due to the government of Noboa's failure to comply with the constitution.
In Ecuador, there is no rule of law. It was lost a long time ago. They do whatever they want. I used to hear that they were accused of authoritarianism. Well, authoritarianism is not only illegal, it is also unpopular. Here there are illegalities, constitutional breaches, persecution, violations of human rights, open fraud, the appointment of prosecutors at will, the destruction of parliamentary procedures, and all these abuses. Maybe they will be a little more limited after the tremendous beating that the Ecuadorian people give them.
In Venezuela, Foreign Minister Levan Hill applauded the victory of the Ecuadorian people after they reject the policies proposed in the referendum promoted by President Daniel Noboa. Through his social media accounts, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister expressed a great victory for the dignity of Ecuador from the land of Simon Bolivar. We send a big hug and congratulate the Ecuadorian people, heart of the great patriots and revolutionary Manuelita Sanz and General Eloy Alfaro. The majority of the people rose up to say no to the surrender policies promoted by a corrupted government linked to drug trafficking, achieving a historic political victory. Ecuador has demonstrated its greatness in embracing the path towards reconquering popular victories and a new stage of struggles against those who have sought to destroy it with corruption, violence, and submission. Top results in Chile tallies show a narrow difference between candidates Janet Jara and Jose Antonio Cast in the first round of the presidential elections. With more than 99% of the votes counted, data indicates that Jara is leading the tally with 26.8%, followed by Cast with 23.9%. With these results, the right wing secures majorities in both chambers, and thus Jara, the former minister under the President Boric, and Cast, the son of former Nazi military officer, will face each other in the presidential runoff on December 14. Meanwhile, in the third place is Franco Parisi with 18.4%, who conducted his campaign from abroad because he had a travel restriction order for failing to pay child support for his 2 children. Let's take a very first break, but remember you can join us on our TikTok account as teleSUR English, where you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Stay tuned because we'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South. On Monday, the COP30 Climate Summit in Brazil entered its decisive stage after 6 days of negotiations. In a context marked by demands from Amazonian indigenous peoples, civil society, and developing countries, ministers will take on a discussion report that reminds stocks of the most sensitive points. The new emissions conduct targets remind of the formal agenda, despite Brazil's. The forum's host insisting that the inclusion of issues depends exclusively on the will of the states. In parallel with the negotiations, the host countries promote a fund for the conservation of tropical forests, which has come in a totally $5.5 billion and will operate under the logic of green capitalism, generating financial returns and allocating profits through the forest protection after remunerating investors. In Venezuela, 135,000 doses of vaccines against measles, diphtheria, meningococcus, and rotavirus arrive as part of the binational cooperation with the Republic of India. With this incorporation, the comprehensive strategy to guarantee the protection and well-being of the Venezuelan people is strengthened, representing a step forward in the consolidation of the national public health system. In this sense, the authorities emphasize that this action is part of the diplomacy of peace and cooperation agreement that Venezuela has with sister countries. In Santiago de Cuba, the delivery of international solidarity aid continues to families affected by Hurricane Melissa. Supplies needed by families affected by the hurricane have arrived from different parts of the world. Venezuela has been a main supplier with more than 8,000 tons of aid, including food, kitchen utensils, and basic necessities. In this regard, Cuban authorities are supervising and expediting distribution to ensure that every family receives the solidarity resources. The joint brigades with Albo TCP are making progress in restoring electrical services in Santiago de Cuba, as well as in several provinces affected by Hurricane Melissa in eastern Cuba. The Cuban government reported that local technicians are working together with the Venezuelan personnel sent to support more than 34,000 affected families. Priority is being given to the most vulnerable and complex areas of the eastern region due to the level of damage sustained by the infrastructure during the weather event. The Palestinian resistance movement Hamas rejected the proposal that the United States plans to present to the United Nations Security Council, arguing that it does not contribute to stability in the Gaza Strip. Hamas spokesman Sassem Qassem stated that the United States proposals does not stop the aggression or protect the Palestinians' right to self-determination. Hamas is seeking a resolution before the Council that safeguards Palestinian rights, prevents the expansion of the war against the Gaza Strip, and halts Israeli military operation in Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem. Let's take a last break, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Financial break, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Tensions between China and Japan escalates after Japanese Prime Minister's statements on the risk of military intervention if China takes actions against Taiwan. This Sunday, Chinese military operations began with naval patrol in the waters of the Senkaku Islands, controlled by Japan, but claimed by China under the name of the Oju. This naval exercise is only the beginning of large-scale maneuvers that Beijing will carry out in the Yellow Sea between Monday and Wednesday. China opposed the interference of other countries in Taiwan as it is an internal matter and a red line that no one should cross.
The provocative remarks on Taiwan recently made by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi have seriously undermined the political foundation of China-Japan relations and worsened public sentiment between the two countries. The environment and conditions for the previous joint public opinion survey results have undergone major changes, requiring reconsideration of the relevance and timing of publishing the results. The responsibility for this lies with the erroneous remarks of the Japanese leader. Regardless of which party or individual governs Japan, it must adhere to and honor the government's commitments on the Taiwan question. We urge Japan to act responsibly toward history and bilateral relations, stop crossing lines and playing with fire, retract its erroneous words and actions, and genuinely implement its commitments to China through concrete actions.
The Chinese Army Navy's Type 076 Sichuan amphibious assault ships complete its first sea trial. The three-day mission evaluates the propulsion and electrical systems of the locally built ship, among other equipment. The Sichuan will undergo further testing according to established plans. The ship, being a new generation of amphibious assault vessel of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, has the capacity to transport helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, and amphibious equipment thanks to its innovative electromechanic technologies and catapults. More than 500,000 homes were left without electricity in the Russian territory of Donetsk after an attack by Ukrainian drones. The authorities of the Donetsk People's Republic report that enemy forces tried to cause damage with combat drones attacks on the energy infrastructure, resulting in power outages in its last 4 regions. The governor of Donetsk said that the power supply has now been partially restored and the repair work is continuing to fully restore the service. The Russian armed forces announced the liberation of several localities in the Donbas region as part of the special operations to denazify Ukraine. The Russian Defense Ministry reported that in some provinces, including Kharkiv and other nearby areas, northern, southern, and eastern troops were deployed with the aim of eliminating Ukrainian formations. And in Bangladesh, the International Crimes Tribunal of Dhaka has sentenced former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to death for crimes against humanity over her government's management of student leave protests in 2024. The ousted politician was on trial in absentia since she flew to country in August last year, living in neighboring India. 3 judges, the bench of the country's International Crimes Tribunal in Dhaka, convicted Hasina of crimes including incitement, orders to kill, and inactions to prevent atrocities. She is accused of oversaw a crackdown on student-led anti-government protesters last year that left at least 1,400 people dead. Hasina had pleaded not guilty to the charges and alleged the verdict as based and politically motivated. The country's former Home Minister was also awarded the death penalty. Following their sentence, the Foreign Ministry of Bangladesh issued a statement calling on India to immediately hand over both convicted and stating that failing to comply would be a grave unfriendly act. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials. We're on Facebook, X, and on Instagram as well. And before closing, we leave you with some images, special images that seek to unite the Venezuelan and Latin American people. For Telesur English and from the South, I'm Ana Marrero. Thank you for watching. Imagine all